Part 2, Chapter 10, Dichotomy.
Are you sure?
Tansu, relax, I said. She argued.
No, you just had an episode or something. Talk to me.
I told you, it was anxiety or something. I need to catch my breath. I held the empty glass in my hand and had one knee raised, sitting up. She was hovering over me, overloaded by everything. I stared at the floor below and listened to the buzzing all around us with patient observation. An icy surge ravaged my bones every so often, becoming less frequent as time went on. I couldn't stop seeing his face light up in the dark. Occasionally, Kel's face would fade away and my dad would appear. I felt sick inside. Wrong. This is the guilt I have to live with, and the wound just keeps getting deeper. I'm not sure how many it will take to break me, but I do know that it's easier than before, and that scares the hell out of me. Alice started chuckling. I spoke in my head. What? She replied, You hold on to those fleeting moments as if they mean something.
They do to me. I'm still human. These things hurt,
I explained. That is just an obligation to your soul. Think of it this way. We just became stronger. One step closer to sin, right? My face became tight.
Yes, but this isn't how I... Forget it. It doesn't matter.
I forfeited the argument. We've been here before. One more finger surrendered to the ditch. Feeling a little empty?
No, I'm exactly who I am. Nothing less,
I stated. How confident in that are you? Because it's definitely a little less cramped in here. She grinned evilly. I could tell the adrenaline had simmered and Tansu was beginning to calm down. Looking at her now, I could see how it affected her. The redness under her nose and the darkness layered over the green of her eyes. I felt sorry for her. Culpable on top of that. The secret that plagued my blood stared her down with animalistic tenacity. And yet she looked at me with a caring smile, blissfully ignorant. I set the glass down. Right then, a low rumble quaked through the floorboards. Without my command, my left hand stretched to the floor beside me and felt the vibration. Tansu's lack of movement indicated this was not a force she could feel. However, she was keen on my reaction when I rotated toward the front door once again. She craned her neck to the side and joined me in my stare for a brief time until the front door opened. Kari jiggled her keys free from the handle with worry painted on her face. Tansu was already rising by the time she entered the hallway under the doorframe.
Mom!
She jeered, moving swiftly to meet her. I remained here, but chose to stand as well, finding the sway inside manageable.
Tansky, dear, I'm so glad to see you.
She dropped her handbag, and they embraced lovingly. I couldn't help but smile as well, witnessing their affection. When they separated, I turned fully to face them. Kari glanced over to me. Fresh tears pooled at the edges of her eyes. She extended her arm in my direction and moved toward me. My expression was taken back by her emotion, and my body became tight.
Kim, I'm so happy you're okay,
she said kindly as she repeated the process and hugged me tightly. My arms trembled, hovering over her back as my chin loosely pressed against her right shoulder. Hesitant, I let my arms form to her shape and returned her gesture. This is the most amount of hugs I've ever gotten in such a short span. Something inside me sparked to life. A crusted, neglected emotion I have long since buried was breathing for the first time. My cheeks got hot, and my chest pounded.
I
stammered, then embraced her fully. A mother's hug. She released me with a deep inhale, then stepped back between us. Tansu spoke.
What's going to happen now?
Kari reached behind her head and started to undo her high bun as she spoke. The school called parents with an automated message. It will be shut down for some time while they do whatever they need to. You said a student was taken to the hospital? She looked between the two of us. Tansu nodded. Then they will question her as soon as she is stable. After that, we can only pray that they find whoever is responsible. She released her hair and looped the ties over her wrist. I asked,
And if they don't find them?
Things will eventually resume, but I have no doubt they will implement change. Something like this will deeply affect the children and parents. she said nervously. Kari's eyes lingered on me for an unusual amount of time. I gave her a confused look. What? Do you feel all right? You look pale, she said. Tansu joined in. That's what I was saying. She had this... I'm just tired. I cut her off. This was my first day. I didn't sleep much last night and barely made it as long as I did before I got a ride home, don't forget. I tried not to sound too annoyed. Are you hungry? I can make you something, Kari offered. It was weird to admit it to myself, but their concern for me was almost irritating. So long have I lived a life of disregard that I felt out of place being presented with such basic consideration for my well-being. I had to retract my initial responses and just go along with them. Yeah, food sounds really good. I blinked hard. Tansu, how about you? She asked. I don't know how much I can stomach right now, she said wearily. In fact, I think I'm going to wash my face with cold water. She passed by both of us and headed toward the bathroom. Kari called to her. I'll make a little extra, in case you change your mind. She then looked at me again and smiled. What are you in the mood for? Anything. Something simple? She winked. I nodded along, admiring her trying to keep the tone light despite how obviously stressed she was. This is what a parent is supposed to do. When powerless in a dire situation, protect and provide. I understood her motivation. She then moved to the kitchen, and I retrieved the phone from the floor where Tansu set it down. I carried it with me over to the living room and sat down on the couch. The cushions sucked me in, and I instantly felt relief. My back cracked and my feet cramped. The transformation was becoming easier to handle, but still left me feeling so drained. The phone rested on my lap, and I just stared at it, listening to the ambient noises in the background. A few pots were being handled by Kari, and the sound of rushing water in the bathroom. So lively. I was delighted to have movement around me that was not to be considered hostile. It was comforting. I thought of his face. Taking the phone in my hand, I dialed a few digits and let it ring once or twice before bringing it to my ear. The ringing continued a few more times before it was picked up. Hello? Hey, Joey, I greeted casually. Kim? Oh, fuck, it's good to hear your voice, he responded. I blushed, thinking about how we had left off. Yeah, I'm sorry to make you worry. I left early because I wasn't feeling too well after we spoke. I heard what happened, and I'm glad you're home safe. I could sense his relief. He gave a long sigh through his mouth. We need to get cell phones, he joked. Right, as if we can afford one, let alone two. No kidding. I'll think about setting aside a little from work, and maybe it can be a birthday gift or something. Priorities, Joey. Anyway, did you hear anything more about what happened? He cleared his throat. Actually, yeah. Jesse's at the hospital now. As far as I know, Stacy's stable, but pumped full of painkillers, so she won't be talking for a bit. The bathroom door opened and stole my attention for a moment. Tansu emerged, looking a little more awake and less shaken as she joined her mom in the kitchen. My focus returned to the call. Jesse? Why is your brother there? He and Brent are like best friends, remember? Oh, right. Also, Jesse's friend Kyle was a first responder on the scene. That's how he heard first, and he headed to the hospital immediately, met up with Brent there, and then called us to let us know. Gotcha. Well, I'm glad she's okay. Hold on a sec. I cupped the mouth of the phone and turned halfway around. Hey, Joey said Stacy's gonna be okay. I called over to them. Kari responded first with a calm sigh. Oh, that's wonderful. Tansu smiled at me as she helped by filling a steaming pot of water with noodles. I smiled back and then turned forward. Sorry, I wanted to give Tansu the good news. Joey scoffed in disbelief. Weird to hear you say that. Come on, Joey. Just because she's a bitch doesn't mean I want her to die, I remarked snidely. Could have fooled me, he joked. Believe it or not, I bumped into her before everything, and she half apologized to me. Bullshit, he practically spit. No, I'm serious. I mean, I still told her to get bent, but it was nice to hear. I chuckled. I could hear him raising a hand. You know what? Let's not get into that. It feels almost taboo. Yeah, I guess you're right. A timer beeped in the background, and Tansu called over. Kimmy, the noodles are almost done. Okay, I called back, then spoke normally back into the phone. Hey, I gotta go, but if anything changes with her, let me know, alright?
Will do. By the way, nice of you to remember how a phone works. Try to keep that habit up, huh?
He said nicely. I wanted to roll my eyes and return with sarcasm, but I didn't. Instead, I sank a little. I'll try. He smiled.
Talk to you later.
Then his line went dead. Setting the phone face down on the coffee table, I stood up with weak knees and made my way over to the kitchen. Kari was straining hot water into the sink, and Tansu grabbed some bowls and forks. I watched them with a keen smile, enjoying the simplistic family moment that would stick with me for some time. It truly is about the little things in life. Kari spoke to me, keeping her attention on the rising steam. I hope buttered noodles will do. I love pasta, so it's perfect. Excellent, she replied. I know my daily competition is that of the school lunches, but I hope I can compete somewhat. Tansu spoke. I don't know, Mom. The lunch lady's food might give you a run for your money. Are you trying to say that I'm a lousy cook? She feigned offense. I nudged Tansu with my elbow and gave her an amused look. Her shoulders tightened, bowl close to her chest as she scurried away to the dining room table. Well, I suppose I can't argue with that, Kari admitted. Nakito was the cook, not me. A hard clang of rattling silverware caught me by surprise. I spun around and saw Tansu, suddenly rigid, staring out the windows into the side yard. She held the stack of bowls on the table with harsh pressure. I looked to Kari, who returned my confusion with a saddened breath through her nose. She carried the plastic bowl of fresh noodles past me and set it on the table, then paused to give Tansu a reassuring hand on her upper back. I waited until Tansu began moving again before I took my seat at the table. I sat with Kari on the kitchen side, facing the windows, and Tansu sat across from me with Kari on my left. The food was passed around, and the three of us started eating. Amidst the scrape and clang of our forks, Kari wiped her mouth and started another conversation. So, Kimberly, you mentioned earlier that your friend from school is doing all right? She confirmed. Before I could say anything, Tansu spoke ahead of me. Stacy isn't her friend. She's a bully, she said with audible irritation. I see. Kari reacted in monotone. I spun my noodles in the bowl, thinking of her response. She is a bully, but she wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, we were friends. Well, sort of. But then my mom died and she changed. We both did. Tansu looked interested. I didn't know that. I shrugged. It wasn't worth telling. To this day, I don't know why she started being so mean to me. Well, I'm sure my mood swings didn't help, but one day on the bus, she just told me she didn't want to be friends anymore because my family is the worst. I divulged. Kari set her fork down on a napkin. Did your parents know each other? I considered in silence for a moment. Not like they were friends. I know her mom has worked in retail in town and probably saw my parents around. Her dad still manages a factory 2 towns over, I think. And that's about it. Tansu responded next. Maybe they didn't like each other. I mean, adults are older, but it doesn't mean they're any more mature than us kids. Maybe they had something going on and it trickled down to you. My lower lip raised. It's possible. But honestly, it doesn't matter to me. I have a feeling this whole thing will force a new perspective on her. I took another bite. I'm just happy she's alive. One death is far too many, Kari commended. Me too, I said softly. Anyways, Tansu said. Mom, how was work? Boring, actually, but that just means I have good students. Dedicated to learning? I smirked. She looked happy. Absolutely. It makes it really easy to grade papers when they all try their best. My food was dwindling, so I slowed down a little. Must be rewarding to being a teacher. Tansu had finished her food and pushed a plate away. Yeah, but she quizzes me on really advanced stuff just to make me feel stupid. I chuckled. I do not, she defended herself. Tansu gave her a baffled look. Do too. Kari rolled her eyes. You're exaggerating. I would never try to make you look stupid. I didn't say anything, just watched. Although this talk about her career made me think about my own future. The future I probably wouldn't live to see. This planted another seed in my belly to add to my garden of anxiety. I receded in my chair. Thank you for the food, I said softly. A faint smile on my face as I stared down at my own lap. They each looked at me with a melancholy change in the atmosphere. I stood myself up, taking the bowl in my hand. "Oh, Kim, don't worry about that. I'll take care of it," Kari gestured. I set the bowl back down, strength fading from my arms as several disputing emotions found their way into my core. I looked at them with tired eyes, but a smile on my face. I thought about outside, the expanse of the sky and the cleanliness of the air. I considered what was close and settled on the little community park at the turnaround right down the street. "I think I'm gonna go for a walk," I declared. Kari asked, "A walk? Where?" "Yeah, I think I want to just go to that little park, just to clear my head. I won't be long, I promise." Tansu's expression heightened. "The park? But it isn't safe." "Guys, relax. It's still daylight. There's plenty of houses around, and I'll be fine." Worry in their eyes, they didn't argue. "Please don't wander far," Kari asked. She stood from her chair, and Tansu followed. "Can I go with you?" Tansu asked. "No, Tan. I want to go alone." She gave me a longing look, hopefully understanding what was going through my head on a very basic level. I wasted no time. With a gentle stride, I made my way to the front door and slipped my shoes on, making sure my laces were tight. Then I exited the house and embraced the wide open space around me. A heavy burden was lifted from my chest the moment I took in the fresh air, and a pleasant aura surrounded me. Instant relief entered my pores, and my steps were carried with optimistic introversion. Turning left at the end of the driveway, I walked along the side of the road past the other nearby houses. Directly across from Tansu's place was another house with a picket fence that 2 small children were playing behind. I glanced at them, listening to their jeering and absorbing their playful energy. A small side yard of well-kept grass lay between the house and the parking lot of the playground. I stepped across the gray pavement and moved toward the collection of equipment for kids to play on. A slide, monkey bars, a spinning corral, and a seahorse spring rider. All of this seemed like fun if I was a little smaller. I know Tansu expressed wanting to go play here a few times, but I was never in the mood. Now I see why she wanted to go with me today. Oops. Now I feel like an ass. I'll make it up to her. I had my eyes on the swing set to the left of the jungle gym. I stopped a few feet away and watched the middle swing steadily sway back and forth with a rolling breeze. The sky was blue, and the clouds were minimal. The temperature was fair, if only slightly chilly in a short sleeve. I could smell rain on its way, a contradiction to the sun. An electric crackle rose in my skull, which caused my equilibrium to shudder. "You want to talk?" I asked out loud. Spinning around, I looked for any bystanders. Behind that house with the fence was a soccer field that a group of kids were playing in, too far to be concerned with. In the parking lot were 2 parked cars, one empty and one with a guy seemingly taking a nap behind the wheel. "Don't you?" Alice responded wickedly. I took my seat on the middle swing and kicked off the ground, staring off at the distant trees while I started the conversation. "What's gonna happen to Mr. Kell? His soul, I mean." I felt her kinda shift herself around. "We absorbed his essence. Your relationship with the deceased plays a big factor in how much strength we gain. So, it was a moderate amount." She explained, sounding annoyed that she has to keep telling me these things. "So, you mean the closer I am to somebody, the bigger the boost?" "Essentially. Your father, for example, was huge for us. The first usually is, given the context of our purpose. Kel was just your teacher, but a mentor nonetheless." I kicked harder from the dirt below me, catching wind with my rising momentum. "Are there souls trapped in me?" She scoffed. "No, their souls go to wherever it is they are destined, but their life force is mine. A part of them is still in there. I can feel it." My hand gripped the fabric over my shirt. "When I dream, it isn't a mimic of his voice I hear. It's him. And Kel. His face is going to stay with me forever." "Don't be so hard on yourself. That guy wasn't so innocent. They never are." She paced around in my head. "What do you mean?" I could hear her sticking her tongue out in disgust. "Believe me, a dirty soul is more than fulfilling, but he had a sour burn." She paused. When we consume their energy, we get an idea of who they were, imprinted memories and coagulation of their knowledge. It's how we grow from being mindless killers to beings of drive and purpose. And what was so bad about his? I asked apprehensively. She was reluctant to answer. Tell me. Her face was pensive. Meh. He was a good dad, but an unfaithful husband. An affair? That isn't so gut-wrenchingly horrible as you make it sound, I stated. She snickered to herself. All I'm gonna say is he really enjoyed his job. I dug my heels into the ground to stop myself. Closing my eyes, I shuddered, picturing the image she presented. Something I really didn't want to see. Oh, was all I could muster. My feet kicked off again. The wind lightly whipped past my ears and kept my focus there. Everything around me was muted as my thoughts roamed. I cycled my lungs, silently fighting off the prodding horror, thinking of everything that's occurred to me in these past 2 weeks. Hell, not even that long. Do you think— Shh! Alice cut me off. My feet raised off the ground, and I kept swinging, now holding my breath with wide-open eyes. I could sense Alice scanning, expanding her energy all around to detect something. Low monotone whispers crept into my ears as the atmosphere changed all at once. Behind us! Alice shouted. As fast as I could, I hopped off the swing, using the previously built momentum to send myself forward. Hitting the ground with an awkward stumble, I turned around to see another person standing a few feet behind me, wearing a long flowing cloak. Their hand was extended, palm open and fingers partially clenched, right where my head would have been on the backswing. The cloak covered them completely, except for the outstretched hand and arm. Even from here, I could see their skin was gray. One thing that stood out to me was how short they appeared. I could rest my chin on their head without a problem. Is that the same Tuffle as before? I asked in a panic, realizing Tansu and her mom were only a few hundred feet away. No, Alice stammered. Their energy is much more powerful. My teeth grit tight, but worry tainted my expression. I kept my eyes on their head, trying to glance past the shadow cast by the hood, but there was nothing to see. The hood was baggy and extensive, entirely obscuring their face behind the fabric. Their hand retracted, brought tightly over their chest with the fingers still firmly angled. Then, this person extended the same hand to me. This time, their palm was aimed at my face, and in the center of the skin was a glowing sigil. Odd parallels and intersecting lines hovered an inch off the skin and pulsed with hot, visible energy. With tender aggression, this person crushed the sigil in their hand, shattering it like glass. The moment the pieces burned to the ground, the world became still. In the corner of my eyes, I could see the sky had grown dimmer, but not dark. The grass which surrounded this sand had ceased to move. There was no wind. Directing my eyes without moving my head, I looked around and saw the trees, too, were frozen in place. Not good, Alice griped. What do we do? I responded. Fight. There's no other choice. I had to get angry enough to start the transformation. That wouldn't be too hard, given the normal circumstances, but I had already changed twice in such a short time span. My body and mind are so drained, which would make the process invasive and dangerous. But I had to try. Before I could focus my thoughts on negativity, the new stranger lifted their other hand, now directing both to me. The sleeve glided down their thin arm and revealed what appeared to be darker folded skin. This arm seemed damaged somehow. They pointed 2 fingers at me with the odd arm and then flicked them inward. Following that motion came a small gust of wind from behind me. That gust quickly sharpened into the accuracy of a pencil and drilled into the back of my skull. It hit me like a piston and completely disabled my ability to guard as I lingered forward. A flick of the wrist and a similar hand gesture created another spiraling bolt of wind from my side. This one entered my ears and caused my vision to go white for a moment, and a stinging ring to deafen me. I fell to one side, catching myself on one arm and trying to shake off the daze. Pissed off and disoriented, I dug my fingers into the sand and pulled up a handful of the loose grains. In a swift motion, I threw the sand at their face and started a dash as a follow-up. To my surprise, the sand stopped mid-air and then dropped to the ground. I was already in the middle of sprinting toward them with a fist ready when I saw this occur. Stricken by shock, I let my guard down and my sloppy fist continued on. They reached out and caught my fist in their left arm and drove their knee into my pelvis. Before I could react in any way, the hand which held the sigil clutched the top of my head and held me there. "Fuck!" I screamed. A white-hot wave began soaking into my head, and with it came a brutal shakiness. "Jim!" Alice called out to me, her voice becoming lower and quieter. "Break free.
You have to."
Her voice faded, and my vision quickly disappeared. My mortal body was no longer real. I was floating. No, falling. Farther and farther I dropped, wind rushing into my ears as I was dragged into limbo. I couldn't struggle. There was no body to fight with.